and you hit the blue button.
Oh, okay, hold on. There. Going live.
What? You think it's working, guys?
Yes.
Okay, it's working. Way. Welcome into the Nutmeg Tavern. I'm your host, John Townsend, and we're going to be talking about fun 18th century stuff today. Hello to all those folks that have piled into the Nutmeg Tavern from all over the world. It's amazing that it's such an amazing, eclectic set of folks coming in here. So welcome in, find a seat, and we're going to be chatting specifically about the culture that makes up what happens in the 18th century here in North America. Because I just got back from a quick, very just lightning fast trip to Frontier Culture Museum in Stanton, Virginia. But special thanks to Lauren, who's on the console today instead of her normal spot in the chat. So she's got to do two things at once because Ivy was busy and she wasn't able to help us out with the live stream today. So bear with us with the mechanics of today's episode because Lauren doesn't usually do that job. So she doesn't know how all those fun, weird time vortex things work out. But that's all right. We'll make it work. So yeah, just got back from a trip. My wife and I were down at Stanton, Virginia, and it was a wonderful trip. It's about 9 hours from here, and we actually stayed in just across the border in West Virginia, so kind of up in the mountains there. And wow, don't look for cell service anywhere close to where we were staying, let me tell you. But I've been to Frontier Culture Museum several different times. I love that particular museum and what they're trying to accomplish. This is a museum, I'm not sure exactly when they started acquiring the houses and start putting it together, probably in the 80s or the 1990s. We've been there several different times over the years, and they said, okay, the people that come into this backcountry of Virginia, where did they come from? They came from England. They came from Ireland. They came from Germany. Sometimes there's Native Americans. There's even African village part of that, so that you can see all the different cultures that kind of come together, meld together, and become what the culture there is today in that area. In fact, basically all over North America. And they're looking at things like what are the houses like in these different areas, and how do those 3 or 4 different styles of houses come together and become what a standard American house is like in, say, 1820 or 1850. So we have a 1630s English house, a late 18th century, early 19th century Irish house, a German house, and then they've got a cabin, sort of almost exactly like the cabin that we made there at their spot. And then they have an 1820s house and an 1850s house, along with a little bit of a Native American village. And they have had in the past I think a West African village that they had it built, and then the weather kind of destroyed it, and so they're having to rework that. But really interesting spot. They have interpreters or docents in each one of the buildings, so that when you go through there, you've got somebody to talk to. They've got lots of, the grounds are interesting, livestock, gardens, some things like that. So it's a really neat spot. And there aren't very many places you can drive, say, 8 hours from where I'm at to see an English house of 1630. And so those are the kinds of things that I'm super interested in. What's the architecture like? What are the differences and similarities? So do you have any quick questions that I need to answer before I pop into some of this content?
Well, Speed and Style Tony just asked, does the German house have a German kitchen?
Yes. And what I've got here, so the reason why I went there was to get a whole bunch of B-roll for future videos. But I thought what I would do is kind of do some like little mini tours. These don't have any sound or anything like that, so I'm just going to talk over them. And they're just 2 or 3 minute little clips of the individual houses. And we'll just go through them one by one, and you can kind of see what's going on. And none of these houses are fancy houses. They're in fact kind of low level housing, sort of, let's say, lower middle class kind of housing, or even lower than that kind of housing. And each one of the places, well, most of the places have barns attached to them. The Irish house, I think, was the first one that was moved to the location, also has a small blacksmith shop that's close to it. So there are a lot of different things going on with it. But I'm just going to go through and we're going to watch, and I'll just talk over it. About a 2-minute piece, and this is going to be the English house. This is 1630s. This is not a reproduction house. This is a house that was moved from England over to this museum, and they've restored it back to as close as they could get to the house during that time period. So here we go. Let's see what it's going to turn out like. There we go. It does have, I think, tiles on it, and we can see that it's got really not that many windows. This house is pretty small, really, and you can see as we walk in the front door here how low the ceilings are. And look, you walk in the front door and it's the bedroom. It's kind of like the bedroom / living room of the house. We can see kind of sort of storage of where people are eating. There is a little fireplace in this just for heating. This little yellow spot here is actually, it looks like a cabinet. It's actually a doorway that goes into the upstairs. And we can see that open door off to the side here. We'll go through that here in a second, but there also is a sideboard with, the few, expensive things that a house would have, nice things. And then here's the workroom. And this room is about the same size as the other one, just a single window. And they've got here settings for storing food. They've got workspaces for doing some, textiles. And then there's a cheese press here. And we can also see, after we get done looking at the cheese press, we can see what's going on with the construction of the wall here. Sometimes these are called little truth windows, as you can kind of look in. So there's the truth window. We can see the sort of wattle. And we popped into the kitchen. We can't see the kitchen in its wholeness because it's kind of hard to shoot, but we can see the hearth, big walk-in hearth here with over the top. And outside, we go to the garden area, and a nice little, just sort of herb garden here. You can see hops growing up on the strings there. There's some beans growing up on that too, and some, kind of standard garden things. They've got strawberries and onions and lettuces, things like that growing in their garden. Of course, there we go. They do have, in their area, we got a lot of problem with deer, so it's difficult for them to grow as many things as they want in their gardens because the deer hop over the fence and eat everything. But, it's a fun spot. And very, very fun to see what's going on with that house. I didn't kind of have a shot from the back so you could see the chimney on it. It's got this amazingly beautiful brick chimney work that comes up out of the top of it. One of the things, the reason why you don't see a lot of windows on that house is that's a time period when they have window taxes. Windows are expensive in the first place, and they let the cold air in, and they taxed them. So even when they did have a lot of windows, at some point, at some certain times in the 18th century, they would actually rip the windows out because they didn't want to pay the taxes on them. Really, really neat house, though, to kind of tour and see just how, the the beams would work together, and then that infill where they would just put wattle and daub on the inside of that. I do wonder about whether, so just for preservation's sake, they paint the wooden parts, the beams on there. I doubt that they would have been painted originally, but just left to, naturally weather. But of course, after almost, 400 years, the wood kind of gets bad. So you want to paint that and keep it nice. So that was the English house, 1630s. And yes.
Okay. I do have a couple questions just to
Yep.
let you know before we move on to the
Sure.
next section. Okay. So one of the questions was, did they have any original items from the home itself when they moved in?
I don't think anything that's in the house. Most of the items that you see there are period reproductions of pieces, because they don't have a way to protect things from getting, like a 300-year-old piece of pottery from getting broken or let's say walked off with. So all the individual pieces in there are reproduction pieces, but generally pretty well researched, so that you know that you're looking at things that are very similar to what they would have had.
So here's a question, and I don't know what the term is. Was there diapering in the chimney brickwork? Do you know the term?
I don't know that particular term for the brickwork, but it is, I don't know if we can see. Let's just.
It might come up in the slideshow.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think I have any outside slide works, but it does have a very intricate brickwork on that, and I'm sure that you could find some images of that on their website. And if I went through all my pictures, I might be able to find something, but I can't do that at this moment.
So this person was wondering about the, I believe it was the white, whether it was stucco or white paint. And was it like stucco that was whitewashed on the building?
I would say in the time period that it would have been, so it's like the wattle of the wood, and then something like, you could just use, sometimes plaster in the time period is just basically mud, right? It's a lot like the cob that we've used in the past, a mix of clay, some sand, and definitely things like either manure or straw in there, so you get fibers that lock those together, and then you just plaster it over those wattle sections, and it adheres pretty well. But then you do really want to do something like whitewash over the top of that so that it isn't too permeable to the weather. So I'm not sure if they used paint or if they used something like whitewash. And even on whitewash, you kind of have to redo it a lot.
So how many of these houses, or were any of them an A-frame construction?
None of them are constructed like that.
So, and then would this be considered an average middle-class home, or was this a more well-off family?
Probably not terribly well off. This is a smaller kind of house, so definitely on the lower side of middle class or the upper side of low class.
Okay. I think that's it for specific questions to this one. There was a
There
more
you go.
general, and I'll ask it
Right,
later.
right. So, this is, now remember the time period when people are coming to, say, Virginia, so Virginia, say 1609, 1610, in that time period, and then coming to New England later on, 1620s. That's the kind of house that's, kind of typical in their time period. Of course, there's different kinds of architectures in different places in England or different places at the time, but it gives you a glimpse of kind of what's going on really early. And even the houses that people build early in the 17th century in North America are closer to that than they are to kind of what we think of as a colonial home kind of construction. So we see that, and we need to really kind of grasp that kind of architecture and what's happening early in North America. So here's the Irish house, and this one's probably, even though they're making it for 18th century, this is probably a very early 19th century home. We walk into the main room. We're not going to go into this side room, but we walk into this main room. You can see the internal of the roof there. Windows just tiny, but this is a stone structure, so really nice. It was cool inside. It's real thick walls. Just the quick shelving and furniture that you would see in here, and you can see they got really. These stools are only like 6 inches high, but they're small like that because it tends to be a very smoky kind of a room, and the lower you sit, the more out of the smoke you are. Again, this is the main room, and there's a sleeping area right inside there. You can see the big both heating and cooking fireplace. Again, we have kind of regular storage along the walls. One other, again, pretty small window, a standard table. And you can see how the table's right there by the window, so you can see what you're doing on it. This is a little mill here for grinding grain. And there you can see the thatch on the roof of this one. So just amazing thick thatch. We don't think about thatch too much here in North America. There's very, very few thatched houses that exist anymore. But there were thatched houses in the time period. And even in when we read in the Bark Covered House, when he had a thatched barn. This is the barn area here with one opening, and then little stalls and whatnot for storage of things and for animals. This house did have along the side, it did have a separate room you could get into. And then there was a workroom also that I didn't go into because there was somebody in there at the time. As you went in that front door, there was a little room right off to the side there that was the standard workroom. And these houses are all very similar in that you kind of go into the main room. There may be a separate kitchen area, and then a lot of the house is set aside for storage / work. These are all a time period when a lot of the things that are going on in a household are very industrious. So there's always sort of like a cottage industry going on, and many times that cottage industry is directly related to textiles. So dealing with flax or wool or other sorts of textile work. And in the side room of the Irish house, they had a spinning wheel and a loom in it. Real kind of typical of the time period, and something that the vast majority of people, that while somebody may go out for a job and they might do agriculture, they're also going to be doing something like textile at the same time. It's one of those things that every household is at least, they know somebody who does that if they don't do it themselves.
So there was somebody who was wondering, you kind of touched on it, but how many rooms did an average house have?
Yeah, so all of these houses that we're going to look at, even the German one, there's the kitchen / eating room, a sleeping room, and a workroom. And then, they might have, like the English house does have an upstairs room, but basically just another sleeping room and really nothing else. And the German house has sort of an entryway, the kitchen, a main living room, an almost bedroom, and then a workroom, and then a more sleeping quarters upstairs. So not very big. They're all very, very similar in their size, really, and the amount of space they're giving to each one of those quadrants of life, basically. It's like sleeping, eating, working, right? So all very similar.
somebody else was wondering, was it uncommon to separate the sleeping space from the other rooms and not being able to imagine sleeping in the kitchen?
Yeah, it seems like it's real. It's it depends on how big that family is and where you're going to put all those people who are sleeping. And so many times you'll have these kind of upper rooms that have sleeping areas, but those are kind of the sleeping area for kids or people that can handle cold weather. And the main it's like the mother father of the household are going to be in that main sort of come in the front room and there's the bed kind of situation where it stays nice and warm for the for the people that are kind of in charge, and then other people are going to sleep in this, and then there's an overflow for as many as however many kids there are. Well, we're going to scatter them in and up and around.
Well, and maybe winter, the downstairs being the warmest, but it was probably coolest too, because the little house has in the houses with the really thick walls, it tends to be insulating enough that it stays pretty cool in the summer.
Oh yeah, and all these houses were fairly cool, for that kind of setting where there are places that are going to get a lot warmer in them, but I was impressed by them.
Somebody was asking if they could visit the Frontier Culture Museum. And I still, at this point, I'm going to have to find a link because I didn't actually look that one up, which I think is...
There you go. Yes.
The
Frontier Culture Museum is open 3 seasons out of the year. They're actually working on a bigger kind of building for wintertime. But 3 seasons out of the year, they're open every day of the week. And you can go and visit it. It's a really, really nice a museum. So yep. And did you find the link to drop in there?
Yes, I did. I put
there
the
you
link
go.
in.
So that is the Irish house. So let's jump in and give the quick tour of the German house. I don't have as much of this. I didn't have the ability to kind of get the full backed out and go into every room as much, but there's some good stuff here. This is kind of a low angle. It's really not quite that tall, but it is a tall house. It's got these amazing ceramic tiles, both on the barn that you can see in the background and then on the house themselves. These are interlocking ceramic tiles. Just love the design. Notice how similar it is to the English 1630s in the exterior, and even the interior construction of the way the wall is done. Very, very similar. This is the workroom part of the house, and they've set this up as a tailor shop. Here we're going into the kitchen. Now, this is a very wide angle lens. This is a very small room. This is maybe 8 by 10, 8 by 12. And lots of crockery over on this wall. We can kind of see that pot. I love that one right there in the middle. Cooking pot ceramic from this classic Northern Germany region and German region. And then we've got the window, and then we're going to get to here the hearth, the raised hearth, which is what I've based the German kitchen's hearth on. Now this one's lower, but you can see it's a little over knee height, and it's got a cooking platform and then this big hood over it. And you can see how much smoke kind of goes up and around. Even though that hood is really deep and goes into a steep chimney, still smoke escapes. This is the opening to a jam stove. So there's a stove that's built in, a ceramic stove, just for heating the other room. And here you put wood in it. And then on the other side of the wall, in the living room section, which you didn't get to see because, you want to go to the museum and see it yourself, right? On the other side of the wall is the exterior of the stove, basically as a big ceramic box. When you look at it, you don't even know that there's a stove in the room, but it gives radiant heat off. And you don't ever have to worry about the smoke getting into the main room because it's all happening in the kitchen. Somebody's in their kitchen, they're stoking that up, they get that all hot. And it can be a very, very efficient way of heating a house. One of the problems they had in this region was that firewood was really expensive. So you're making fairly small cooking fires, and to heat up the house, you're using this very, very efficient wood stove. And it creates radiant heat that goes through that. If you look in the main room, we didn't go into, standard kind of living, eating room area, large table, and then kind of separated by not, what do I want to call them? Not structural walls, but just sort of, walls to separate off. There was a sleeping area back in there, and there was also stairs, again those similar cabinet stairs where you open up a door. It looks like a wardrobe or something. You open that up and there's stairways that go into the upper floor of that, and there were a couple of sleeping rooms upstairs. Now, none of the upstairs in any of these houses, if they have upstairs, the public can go into, because there's no way of, because they're old structures, they don't want a lot of traffic up there. Many years ago, you could go and see the upstairs, but that was many years ago. So that's the German house, and the German barns are like 2 German barns over there, really, really big barns. Really, one of the more interesting structures there, but you can kind of see the real similarities between those 3 very different cultures and what's going on with, the construction type and style, and, some fun stuff like that. The kitchen, of course, always fascinated me from day one because of what's going on there with the hearth idea, and how much better that makes it for something like what we do when we do our cooking episodes. Now, not to say that those raised hearths are only happening in, say, Germany, but they just don't show up as often, but they do show up in places in the Great Britain and in France and other places. You'll see different styles of those raised hearths, specifically for larger kitchens. So,
somebody was wondering, the stove being built into the wall, could that cause fires?
Well, it's only built into the wall, as in it's brick, it's ceramic. There's nothing, really you're going to worry about that getting so hot that's going to catch any wood that's close to it on fire. So it probably has got at least a brick of, a full sideways brick worth of ceramic between it and any kind of wood structure, and probably more than that. So I wouldn't worry about that in the least. Mm-hmm. I mean, they generally want to have a lot of brick there just to absorb the heat, so you have a lot of radiant heat in the first place. So, and I think there's a central, basically, brick core to that house with all the chimney work that has to go on there.
So Speed and Style, Tony sent in a super chat. Were all these houses built where they are now, or were they moved there?
Right. Each one of the houses that you've seen so far, the English one, the Irish one, and the German one, came from those regions. And they're all period houses. So the 1630 house from England moved brick by brick, to that spot in Virginia. Same thing with the Irish house, and the same thing with the German house. So those are all period houses from their region, moved over to Stanton, Virginia. And there's sort of like a sister museum. I don't know if they talk about it much, but in the time period, there was called the Ulster American Folk Park that kind of did the opposite for Ireland, where they took American things and they took them to Ireland, so that people that are in Ireland could see, it's like, oh, this is the kind of what happened to people that went from Ireland to America, what their life was like in the early days.
Did they talk about how they moved them? Did they take them apart and bring them?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm glad I didn't do that. That sounds tough. Okay, so I do have a question that was more general, that's not specific to the houses. And it is there a cultural practice of the time period that you have implemented in real life? And what an interesting question. And when I thought about it, what I came up with was doing work in the evenings while listening to something. Because we'll get together in the evenings and maybe read a book out loud or watch something. And I almost always have something with me to work on.
Yeah.
And I didn't used to do that. It's because I'm mostly doing stuff for the store.
Yeah. You want to hit that chat and pop it off the screen.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I think there's probably a lot more of that I do that I don't realize that I even do because I've done this for so long that some things are, sort of natural for me, and the other people would go, why do you do that? But I think the example that Lauren mentioned is typical, and that is, the kind of working on things all the time and having home projects that you do that are just, some people, they work a hard 9 to 5 kind of job or a factory job, and then they come home and it's like, no, I'm done with all that work stuff. I'm not going to do anything, right? And that's not that's not the way I work or live my life. Saturdays and Sundays, Saturdays definitely, it's like I'll do some kind of work. It may be work, or it may be, whatever kind of work, but evenings, same thing. And, we try to read books or, do things together a lot more like they would have done possibly than a lot of people do today.
Have you ever read into Captain Cook Adventures?
Yeah, so I've read some of it's been probably a good 5 years since I've read the narratives of Captain Cook and the South Seas things. And it can be kind of, if you're reading the originals, it can be a little dry reading. It's like, well, we went this place and we bought hogs and, we had these kinds of interactions. Sometimes they had good interactions or difficult ones. It's certainly not novel kind of reading, but interesting, especially, what they expected, what they thought was interesting. Of course, it's very different from any kind of culture that I'm used to even now. So it is almost, I don't know, I'm not sure how to explain. It's one thing to read, say, Peter Kalm, and he is going through North America and he's describing what's happening, and he's explaining things because this isn't how it's done where he's at, right? So period travel is really good to read because they're looking at it through new eyes. And, when you've got the double whammy of what normal life was for Captain Cook, and then he's writing about his adventures and the interactions there, you have a hard time kind of wrapping your head around what he expected to see and what he was describing. So sometimes it's a more difficult read.
We've got a super chat from Azula Akemi. No comment, just a super chat. Thank you. And then there's a super chat from Max Sarkol. What was the raised area near the door in the workroom part of the house with the cat on it?
Right.
The
Yes.
tailor's.
So that was a tailor shop, and if you look at pictures of tailor shops in the 18th century, there are no sewing machines, right? So people are sewing by hand, and the typical thing that's going on there is they have a raised platform that the tailors sit on and do all their sewing, so that they can have all that the pieces, parts, or the garment kind of on the table, but they're right down at that level. So they sit down on that table and they do all that. And then kind of on the other side of the room was a nice big table for cutting things out right in front of the window. And many times even those platforms were set up right in front of a really big window. So it's time to sew up someone's coat. You'd sit on that table right in front of the window and you'd hand sew that coat together.
Okay, I think we're caught up on our questions.
Right.
Do we have one more?
Yeah, so so I wanted to mention some events, not events that I'm going to be at, but events that are going to be happening this weekend or in the near future. So if you're in this Indiana, Ohio, Michigan area, the fort at Fort Wayne is having the siege at the fort, right?
Yes.
That's this weekend.
The 1812. Mm-hmm.
1812 siege at Fort Wayne is happening this weekend. And what else is on the list?
So coming up, this isn't coming up right away, but starting June 21st and going through August, in North Carolina at the Hickory Ridge Living History Museum, there is a outdoor drama that they do about Daniel Boone, and then kind of going into the lives of the people who are right there on the frontier setting up the town of Boone. So I'm going to drop, I already dropped a link to this.
Horn of the West?
Yes.
Yes.
And Horn in the West. And so I'm going to drop a link to the siege at Fort Wayne, and then I'll drop a link to Horn in the West. And of course, they're so location specific.
Yeah.
But if you're in the area, it's always nice to know that they're coming up.
Right. And also, if you're looking for other events that are happening in your area, you can check out reenactorsschedule.org for a calendar of events that's happening, and you can search on a map what's happening within 100 miles of X, and that way you can find historic events that are going on around you. Every week I try to get to brand new Patreon and YouTube members, renewing members, brand new YouTube renewing and new members, Gent Balabani, and then there's Nicola Tovar, Knight 697, Ashley LeCount, Stephanie Clay, Charles Engel, and Dundas County Archives. And then brand new on Patreon is someone called Ollie. So thank you, folks that help us very, very specifically, directly with those kinds of direct support things, along with, of course, Super Chat and people who go and get really cool merch mugs. I saw somebody in the chat talking about just getting their new Nutmeg Tavern mug in, and they were enjoying that. So thank you for all that amazing support. Now,
Yes.
any other thing before I jump into?
So here's a question.
Yes.
These are more general. Did Northerners use grits as food, or is that strictly a Southeastern dish?
There's mention of grinding the corn in a different kind of way. I think that's normally a more Southern thing, but I would hesitate to count that out. It is tricky to get the corn research, corn as we call it here in North America, because they don't write it about it as much as you want them to. It's like, guys, I know this is really important to you. Why aren't you telling me about it? The same problem that I've got, or that is good that we have travelers going through and explaining things. People that live that life every day don't bother to tell you about something that they eat each and every day. And so you don't hear enough and understand enough about that. And so I can't tell you how popular grits were in the North, or whether it was just like, what are you talking about? We don't eat it like that.
So here's a question. Where would the kids go from these households when they grew up if they had a large family? Would they build another house nearby?
Well, that's it was a really good point and really good question, and it's one of the reasons why North America gets populated the way it does, because the land can, in different cultures, even within, say, England, are different in how they break up the land. And there are some specific ones that say, no, we don't want the land to get sort of subdivided a million times by more and more kids. And so the oldest inherits everything. And so what happens to the second oldest or the third oldest? And you get all these, big families, and there's no land for these other children. There's no extra place for them to go. And so that's one of the reasons why they come up with the colonies in the first place. It's like, well, we're going to get rid of all our second sons because there's no land here, right? Let's go give them some, land someplace else across the ocean. And whether it's that kind of a problem or there's the tenant farmer problem. So in Ireland and places in Germany and other places in England, you have the land being owned by large landowners, and people are just sort of renting these little plots, and the rents can get more and more expensive. And again, you got the problem of there's only so many people that can live here. Where do they go? And that becomes the opportunity for people to go ahead and emigrate and find some place in North America. And they come here in different ways, right? Whether or not they have the funds, maybe they go as an indentured servant or whatever it takes so that they can earn a living and then hopefully, purchase their own land, purchase their own house.
Okay, we ready to do the slideshow?
Yeah, we'll go into the slides. These are just sort of some shots that I picked up, specifically wanting to look at hearth design and those workrooms that each one of these houses have. Oh, wait, we have the American cabin too. Oh. So we've done you've seen our cabin that we shoot episodes in. They have almost exactly the same kind of cabin. There's a little rougher in some ways. Really, I love the look of it. They don't allow you to go into the cabin anymore because, it's maybe not as structurally sound as they might want. But that's because the original cabins weren't meant to last for forever. So here's the cabin video. And you can see this one is, again, very, very close to the same size as ours. It's got a very shaggy shake roof on it. I love it. And, they probably used a little bit smaller logs on it. You can see their chimney on that. I think they had it catch on fire once.
Mm-hmm.
It could happen. It's made of wood. And can we see the inside of it a little bit? Ooh, boy. Okay, there we go. There's the inside with the fireplace. And they just storing whatever they can in this. There's the little kind of bedstead there, and the storage of tools and storage of eating equipment there. Just and that's it. That's what you're gonna live in if you're on the frontier. It's not very big at all. I'm guessing that they would replace their shakes a little. I don't know. I wonder how weatherproof that one is. I didn't remember to ask him.
Are you like, so how's the roof holding?
Yeah, how's that working out for rain coming in? But really interesting, very similar experience. I mean, I kind of worked on our hearth a little bit more, made it a little bit bigger and more cob, and
because you knew you were going to be cooking on it quite a bit.
I knew I was going to be cooking in it, and I didn't want it to catch on fire.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's the American cabin there. Now that isn't from the time period, of course, because all those have rotted away hundreds of years ago, basically. They don't last that long. But even that cabin construction and the style of that is a different building technique that was adapted specifically in North America. And you really don't see cabins like that unless you're in, northern Europe, and even those cabins aren't. Ours are adapted from that style, but made kind of in our kind of material and faster and dirtier. Basically, it's like how can we build a house really quick out of what we've got? And so the American cabin is what comes out of that. So here's the hearth of the English house from 1630. This is a very big walk-in hearth area, probably a good 8 feet wide, and tall enough that I could get in there and not hit my head too much. It's at least 5 feet tall. We can see that this one does have an oven off to the side there on the right hand side. Not the arched opening, but the square opening. There's a little metal door right back behind there. And then you would, of course, just build a fire in there. You can see there is no chimney opening. It's just basically a brick box. And you'd build a fire in there, and the smoke would come out of it and be caught in the larger hearth hood of this large hearth area. And cooking way down way down there on the ground is not easy, but that is the overall cooking area. It's both the kitchen here is half the size of the main section of the house. There's a kitchen, and then there was that other room we saw. Of course, the other fireplace is directly on the back side of this wall, so that main chimney section would feed both sides. One side for the main hearth, one side for sort of heating in the living room area. And this is that hearth in the Irish house. Kind of have these jambs that stick out here, and the overall hood. Again, this is really tall and not nearly quite so wide. It's probably only 5 feet wide, and then that hood area again stops at 5.5 feet or so. Very big crane here, so we can have multiple pots cooking on it at once. And this is I think there's a regular chimney on the other wall of the house. So not in this room, but the other room that's behind it. There would be a small heating fireplace over there. But this is where most of the heat for the entire building really comes from. And then we can see again that German hearth area. Wood is much more expensive and hard to come by, so a much smaller and more efficient cooking space. Let's get that up out of the off the ground. Let's also have the heating part have a stove instead of just open fire heating. So we're going to get a lot more efficiency out of heating in this, and probably just plain a colder house in the first place. And there's a good chance that this would have been a colder climate too, so a little bit more difficult. But each one of these, even this house, with this style of plaster and lath that's going on in there, they also have straw insulation that would be inside the walls to help insulate a house like this. So they had insulation too. Here's the workroom from the English house. So most of what they're showing here is food preparation and gardening tools that they have in this one, but likely it would have had a lot of food storage, like barrels and bags of food things for wintertime, along with the canned goods and whatnot, and dried, they have like herbs drying on racks on the one side there. This is the Irish This is a room we didn't get to see, but the side room in the Irish house, and they've set it up with spinning wheels, with the large loom there for weaving, and you can see that small fireplace on that. And then there's the tailor's room, the work room in the German house. And if you look right on the ceiling of that, you can see that they've left a little area open there. So you can see the insulation in the ceiling of the house, as well as the plaster and lath that's built into those walls. So here we go. Whew, we did it. Yeah, let's see. I have a question. For the walls of the house, what's the average depth, or did they vary from home to home? So they were all, because of the construction, they're all fairly wide. The English house and the German house are constructed with beams that are 8 to 10 inches deep. So the wall sections are going to be, that deep, and the infill that's happening in between the intersees of all those, beams that are in there, they're filling in with that little bit of wattle, and then, there might be some insulation in there, some straw in there, and then they're having that mud plaster on the outer inch or so of that. Do you want to answer that Jay Corbett question about the live streams?
Yes, but I'm still dropping in some links to different things.
Lauren's typing like crazy over there.
Okay, so a couple different questions about, because I do archive the live streams after about a month or so, depending on how, like the flax one is still up. And so some of the more popular ones stay up for a bit longer. But after a while, I archive them. There are different archives. I put a link in for the 24 archive that are just for the ones for this year. And then I put in a link for the one with all of them. But that can be really hard to search through. So that's why I kind of started doing them year by year, because it makes it a little easier to find what you're looking for. And so hopefully that will let you find the ones you're finding.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, we do a live stream almost every week. That means there's 50 hours of live streams per year.
Yes.
Or more, depending on how you look at it. Now, we've been doing the marathons in the live stream space on YouTube, and they're even longer than that. But it can be hard to, the YouTube engine, as it is, doesn't seem to really like channels that have too many videos. It gets confused, doesn't know what to do. It starts to show things to people that they wouldn't be interested in, and it hides things you are interested in. So we have to purposefully sort of restrict the things that are just public. If we let an old live stream live in the public space on YouTube forever, it will start to show it to weird people or show it to people who aren't very interested. And then it'll say, oh, nobody likes your channel. We're not going to show it to anybody. So we purposefully, it's like, okay, we're just going to have these live streams, unless they're very, very popular, kind of, drop off after a while. We don't want them to disappear completely. So they're still available on those unlisted playlists. And then, at certain times we will, link to those if they're particular content that relates. So.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Because every once in a while you're doing a video on, you're doing a live stream on one thing, and you're like, well, this has come up before, because like today I put in the tour of the Irish house that we had done many years in the past, that was of the Irish house at the Frontier Culture Museum, right. And also an interview with a German farmer who was the docent at the German house. So very, very fun to be able to link them with something so specific to them. Now, somebody did have a question. Tammy E. was saying, hubby is now looking at going there for a visit to the museum. How much time should we allow for the visit?
I would say it depends on how much interaction you want to do. And, you know, some people are very, hey, I want to talk to people and get a lot. And some of the docents can have very deep knowledge on something. And, you know, you could easily spend an hour, you know, in the Irish house or whoever. You know, there's the blacksmith shop there. There's, you know, a lot of different things going on. I even had, I might have even created, I think I created a video, but we didn't get to see of all the animals that are there. So they have sheep there, they have pigs there, they have cows there. And, you know, different people would love to talk to you about a particular topic there. You could easily spend 4 to 6 hours without rushing through. You know, it's a real nice site for that. But if you just want to kind of buzz through it and you're in that area, you know, a 2-hour visit, it would be a great time. If you just, it's like, oh, I just want to run through these and, you know.
And this time when you guys were going, you guys rented the golf cart to go.
Yes, they do. It's a fairly large grounds, and it can be, you know, they're not really close together. So they do have the ability to have, like, you know, they have little wagons you can rent if you have kids and you want to drag them around and they can't walk the whole time. Or they do have golf carts and you can drive your cart around, which is what we did because we had equipment and we wanted to go here, there, and everywhere back and forth. So it's a real nice place for that. And you didn't get to see the 1820s house, the 1850s house, the Native American village, or the part of the African part. So, yeah, there's a lot to it.
There was quite a bit more.
Yeah.
Okay, ready to wrap up?
Yeah. So, really thankful for the folks that allowed us to, you know, go to Frontier Culture and you know, we talked to some people there and the head of interpretation and all very kind to us. So it's very nice going to that. Want to super thanks to the Super Chat folks that help us do trips like this. Of course, people on Patreon or Townsend's Plus members and Townsend's YouTube members here. So very kind. Thank you so much for being in the tavern today. And who knows? Do we even know what we're going to talk about next week?
I have no idea.
We're going to have a great topic next week, and it'll be a heck of a lot of fun. Thank you so much for being in the chat today. Thank you, Lauren. And we will see you next week. Thanks for watching.